It is September 2025 and something strange is happening in one of the most fragile countries in the Sahel. Fuel trucks are burning on desert highways. Cities are going dark. A nation of 22 million people is suddenly choking. This is Mali, and someone is strangling it to death. In early September, 6 Senegalese fuel truck drivers were abducted on the Dakar-Bamako route. By September 8, their kidnapping had become a national story in Senegal. Days later, convoys erupted into flames across western Mali. Mid-September, Bamako was facing severe fuel shortages and rolling blackouts. By late October, the government shut schools nationwide for 2 weeks. But this wasn't random violence. It was calculated, methodical, economic warfare. So the question we're trying to answer is, who is behind all of this and why now? To understand how Mali was brought to its knees, you need to understand its geography. Mali is landlocked completely. Every liter of fuel, every bag of rice, every medicine, it all comes by road from neighboring countries. Senegal's port of Dakar to the west, Ivory Coast, Abidjan to the south. These are more than just trade routes, they are lifelines. And by 2025, jihadists had severed all of them. The siege began in Kayes, western Mali, where 80% of the country's gold is mined. Armed fighters from Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, also known as JNIM, an Al-Qaeda affiliate, erected illegal checkpoints. They stopped trucks, burned fuel convoys, kidnapped drivers. Then Timbuktu, the historic city, home to 35,000 people, became encircled. All roads were blocked. Even the Niger River was sealed. Within 2 weeks, flour, milk, and other food items were all gone from markets. By November 29, 2024, Lere, a town of 20,000 near the Mauritanian border, was suffering from total blockade. JNIM fighters destroyed the Derby Bridge 6 days earlier. Trucks turned back. Supplies stopped. The town became isolated. Then Mopti in central Mali. By October 2025, a fuel embargo was in place. For many days, the city sat in blackouts. No diesel for generators, no power for hospitals, no fuel for water pumps. The impact was immediate and devastating. Fuel prices surged. A bag of rice in Timbuktu went up to several times higher. By late October, Mali's government shut every school in the country. But here's what made this different from typical insurgent attacks. JNIM wasn't trying to capture cities. They were just trying to suffocate them. The question is why? Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, JNIM, born in 2017 from a merger of jihadist factions across the Sahel, loyal to Al-Qaeda, led by Iyad al-Ghali. In early September 2025, JNIM announced a fuel embargo aimed at suffocating Bamako's economy. This was what analysts described as an attempt to asphyxiate the capital. This was unprecedented. For the first time, jihadists weren't just fighting Mali's army in remote deserts. They were operating within 50 kilometers of the capital, choking its economy. But why economic warfare? It appears JNIM wanted to make life so unbearable that people lose faith in their government's ability to protect them. The tactics were ruthless. There were ambushes, vehicle arsons, kidnappings for ransom, IED planted on highways, bridges demolished, and it all worked. Transport companies soon suspended operations. Truckers refused to drive the routes. The economy ground to a halt. But running a war, even an economic one, cost money, lots of it. So how do these guys get their hands on this money? October 2025, JNIM secured a ransom of approximately $50 million for 2 UAE hostages. But that's just the visible money. The real funds come from gold. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger produce an estimated 50 tons of gold annually, worth roughly $2 billion. Most of it is mined informally. Most of it is smuggled. JNIM controls mining areas. They tax miners. They protect smuggling routes for a cut. Then there are the weapons. Where do they come from? The answer begins in Libya, 2011. Gaddafi's regime collapses under NATO intervention. His armories are looted. Advanced weapons, anti-aircraft guns, rockets, assault rifles flooded into black markets. An estimated 2,000 to 3,000 Tuareg fighters who had served Gaddafi returned to northern Mali. Heavily armed, they sparked the 2012 rebellion. Jihadis piggybacked on that chaos and Mali's north fell within months. Over a decade later, those Libyan weapons are still circulating. Trafficking networks moved them south through Niger into Mali. The pipeline never closed. But there is another source: Mali's own military. Every time Jenim overruns an army base, they loot the armory. Rifles, machine guns, ammunition, everything. In fact, Amnesty International investigators found Serbian-made sniper rifles in jihadis' hands, traced back to sales to Burkina Faso's army. Legal exports, illegally diverted through capture or corruption. The insurgents are self-sufficient now, funded by ransoms and gold, armed by Libya's collapse and their own victories. They don't seem to need a foreign sponsor. But Mali's government insists otherwise. According to the government's investigation, there are foreign powers involved in this war. August 2022, Mali's foreign minister sends a letter to the UN Security Council. The accusation is that France has violated Malian airspace over 50 times, dropping arms to terrorist groups. The letter claimed French drones and helicopters were secretly supplying jihadists in the desert. France's response was, of course, blunt. They claimed these accusations were false. From 2021 onward, Malian leaders, including then Prime Minister Abdoulaye Maïga, used UN and domestic platforms to accuse France of working to, quote, partition Mali by creating an enclave in Kidal handed to jihadists. And more recently, they accused Algeria of hostile acts, including allegedly shooting down a Malian drone in 2025. Algeria's response was swift and angry. They pointed to their own bloody history fighting Islamist insurgents throughout the 1990s. They reminded the world that they mediated Malian peace deals, not sabotaged them. Well, the diplomatic fallout was severe, but the accusations revealed something deeper. Mali's government believed it was being punished for changing sides. You see, after Mali's second coup in 2021, the leaders grew hostile toward France and the UN. Western nations responded by scaling back security cooperation. France was asked to withdraw all troops by August 2022. They ended intelligence sharing, cut off military training. European Special Forces, the Takuba Task Force, pulled out completely. Development aid was slashed. In fact, the United States halted military assistance and refused to support Mali's military government. By 2023, France suspended even counterterrorism coordination after diplomatic tensions escalated. All of this weakened Mali's military capacity. French drones and airstrikes that once kept jihadists at bay were all gone. With France gone, the jihadists intensified their campaigns. The terrorists also got more firepower somehow. They seem to have been re-energized. The timing raised uncomfortable questions in Bamako. Why did the insurgency suddenly grow stronger? Where did they get the extra firepower? These suspicions weren't universally accepted, but they reflected the government's belief that foreign powers had reasons to see Mali fail. Which brings us to our next question: what does the West stand to lose? You see, France had fought jihadists in Mali since 2013. So why didn't they achieve victory? Why did they need to stay in Mali? What exactly did Mali represent? First, the strategic positioning. Mali sits at the crossroads of the Sahel, bordered by 7 countries. French military bases in Mali provided access to a vast region from Mauritania to Chad. It was a forward operating hub for monitoring jihadist movement across North and West Africa. Losing Mali meant losing eyes and ears on Al-Qaeda and ISIS affiliates in one of the world's most volatile regions. And second, is the resources. Mali is Africa's 3rd largest gold producer. French and European mining companies had significant operations there. They had Barrick Gold, B2 Gold, and others. Military presence in Mali meant stable access to minerals. But there is a third reason, rarely discussed openly, and that is influence. France, you see, has maintained a military presence in its former African colonies for decades, a network called France Afrique. Mali was a cornerstone of that network. So losing Mali didn't just mean losing one country, it meant watching the entire Sahel potentially slip away. And it did, because after Mali came Burkina Faso, which experienced a coup in 2022, then Niger in 2023. All three expelled French forces. All three turned toward Russia, a nightmare for the West. This is why French President Emmanuel Macron was super bitter about all of this. In interviews following the withdrawal, French leaders, including Macron and his ministers, described the Malian leaders as illegitimate and warned that bringing in Wagner, whom Macron said was arriving in Mali with predatory intentions, would leave the country in an even worse security situation. So, any surprises there when the terrorists got stronger and launched even more assaults on Mali? I guess not. Macron was so sure of what was to come if his military got kicked out. Why was that? The bitterness went even deeper. Macron had invested significant political capital in the Sahel. Operation Barkhane was France's largest overseas military deployment. 5,000 troops, billions of euros spent. 53 French soldiers were killed. And for what? All to be expelled, accused of arming terrorists, and replaced by Russian mercenaries. For France, Mali wasn't just a military defeat, it was a symbolic collapse of French influence in Africa. A public humiliation that reverberated across the continent. So, do you now understand why the Malian government's claim of the current situation being a likely punishment is not so far-fetched? As France withdrew, Russia moved in. In late 2021, Mali's leaders invited Wagner Group, a Russian private military company, to provide security assistance. An estimated 1,000 Wagner contractors arrived embedded with Malian forces. But Wagner wasn't just providing soldiers. Russia offered something else, legitimacy without conditions. You see, where Western nations demanded democratic transitions, respect for human rights and civilian oversight, Russia asked for none of that. They offered weapons, training and diplomatic cover at the UN. No strings attached. And the deals came quickly. Russia supplied attack helicopters, fighter aircraft, radar system and ammunition. Also, amidst the ongoing crisis, Mali's authorities confirmed that Russia would deliver between 160,000 and 200,000 metric tons of petroleum and agricultural products. They got fuel, fertilizers, and food to help alleviate the shortages. A deal following up on earlier discussions. Mali was demonstrating it could survive without Western support. But the Russian partnership went beyond military aid. There were economic agreements too. Wagner, you see, gained access to mining concessions, particularly gold mining operations in areas they helped secure. Additionally, Russia and Mali signed agreements on agricultural cooperation, telecommunications infrastructure, and energy development. But has anything changed or improved? Well, since the military took power, there have been changes. Some positive. Mali regained control over key mining revenues. Under previous governments, corruption siphoned off billions from the gold sector. The current government renegotiated contracts with foreign mining companies, demanding higher royalty payments and greater transparency. By 2024, Mali's mining revenue increased significantly. The government used some of those funds to pay civil servants more regularly, a chronic problem under the old regime. There's also been infrastructure investment. Russian partnerships helped fund road repairs in southern Mali. Solar energy projects brought electricity to some rural areas that had never had reliable power. And then there is the sovereignty. However you choose to define it, it returned. For many Malians, especially younger citizens, the government's defiance of France resonated. Street protests in Bamako showed crowds waving Russian flags, celebrating the end of what they saw as neo-colonial domination. The government also pushed for regional unity. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger formed the Alliance of Sahel states, a mutual defense pact designed to reduce dependence on Western military cooperation and ECOWAS. So, is Mali being punished? Are foreign powers arming the groups blockading the country? Or is this simply the tragic outcome of a decade-long war made worse by geopolitical shifts? Well, no single answer explains Mali's current crisis. What is clear is that Mali is caught in the crossfires between global powers. Russia, France, regional states, insurgents, and smugglers, all fighting for influence, money, territory, or survival. Meanwhile, ordinary Malians are left to pay the price. The blockade is real, the suffering is real, and the question of who benefits from Mali's collapse is one the world can no longer ignore.